some point on the spiritual awakening journey, you might have to go it alone. Imagine walking up to a new tribe of people. You've never met them before. And they embrace you, open arms. And you join their community. But you start to notice some things that raise uncomfortable feelings in you. Maybe even red flags. And you start to notice that the way that they're treating some of the people, you have a distinct alarm bell going off. And imagine looking around. Nobody's really saying anything. Nobody's really challenging the status quo. And those who do get ousted. By that point, friends and your family are concerned, if not completely removed from the picture. But you're there, and there's community for you. If you would just drink the Kool-Aid. Now imagine not being that tribe, but meeting a different tribe. Similarly, they open their arms to you and they embrace you. But there's a lot of talking behind each other's backs, triangulation, codependency, and expectations that your identity needs to merge with the group's identity. There's even power plays, competition, politics. Both of these groups are on the quest for a spiritual awakening journey. And both of them have different flavors of social dynamics, all of which require you to compromise something in yourself in order to gain something else, such as acceptance or community. And what's interesting is that you can walk in as being a sovereign being in the beginning, and you can leave completely victimized and traumatized, depending on your interactions in these spaces. Now, imagine a different group entirely. This group, perhaps it's not as accepting at first. They narrow their eyes when they see you. They might even hide their children, grab their purses, and you don't feel particularly welcomed. One person lets you in through a side door, and you have a secret relationship, a friendship with them. Keep everything PG here. And you start to learn about the mindsets of this very exclusive community. And you start to feel a degree of acceptance, but at the same time, a sharp sense of discomfort, like you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. How long do you stay? That depends on what you're really getting met in terms of needs, survival, in each of these three examples. And in all of these examples, they're actually not the right fit for somebody like you, advanced on the journey, that has done a lot of personal work, or is doing a lot of personal work, and is looking to raise out of some of these three-dimensional constructs that bind us together, particularly in communities. And yet, many of us feel compelled to stay among those that have not done the work, who are not really doing the work. And it's okay to acknowledge that. it's okay to acknowledge that there are certain points of the maturation journey where you're going to be behind people, you're going to be around the same peer level with people, and you're going to be teaching and mentoring people. And it's a spectrum. When you are associating with people who haven't done the work and you're trying to win the acceptance of groups where there is a lot of toxicity in a variety of different forms, when you feel like it's not really quite home, why are you staying? Why is an important question, because when you understand that, and you understand why it's so hard to leave dynamics that are not really vibrating with your highest self, that are perhaps even more inclined to keep you in a lower version of yourself because who you are is too challenging for people. It's quite common who haven't done the work. What I've found is that we can often stay enmeshed in these webs. I like to think of them like webs. They're karmic, most of them in nature, meaning they have a series of lessons that play out. And there are roles and archetypes and characters, and it's like being on stage, Shakespearean play. There might even be murder and literal backstabbing, and you see the worst of humanity in these karmic plays. What we find is that there's always a lesson. When we are linked in to karmic webs, we're there witnessing and experiencing firsthand what those lessons are. And sometimes it is like selling your soul or your body or your energy or your wisdom for very little in return. I remember watching a story of famous, relatively cult leaders, how people describe this person. And they go on these extravagant retreats, conferences around the world, stay in very luxurious places. Their attendees pay thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars just for a couple of days. And all of the people that are support staff, at least when these stories were going around, it's been some years now, worked for free. But you know who didn't work for free? That's right. The leader. There were a lot of questions about the leadership style and questions about how they used their power and authority, sometimes vicious ways. And all to gain this sense of what I believe is domination, egoic domination. But of course, they don't necessarily bill that because that's a shadow part of them. So what happens is that they attract, like moths to a flame, people who are susceptible to that style of leadership. People who, at some deeper unconscious level, are drawn to the values that are being advertised and not advertised as a way to play out those particular lessons. Some groups go so far as to brainwash people and to brand them and to reboot the person to make them completely malleable. So it preserves the cohesion. And when things turn dark, a lot of people don't speak up. We are drawn to places that will hit within us certain buttons of wounds that we still have that need to be addressed. And this is why there are infinite number of people, infinite number of possibilities, and a finite number of those who actually sign up for experiences like that. Because these experiences are like curated boot camps for the soul. And when we are afraid to go it alone, when we are afraid to pass through the abyss or the desert, we can easily get attached to mirages, illusions. And when we are particularly thirsty or desirous of some sort of edification of knowledge or spiritual pursuit, paired with any sort of vulnerability or loss that we haven't fully integrated yet with our higher consciousness, we can be very susceptible to the seduction. Places like this, communities like this, when our strength of self is not fully solidified inside, then we can easily be spun around in circles by those who thrive on our confusion and our lack of asking questions or challenging authority, the status quo. And this can create circumstances that can actually be quite devastating under the right conditions. When we are afraid of being alone, we can actually attach ourselves to people who we might even see that they're heavy in their shadow, but we make excuses for them. We might even feel something like a magnetic connection with them. Powerful soul contract potential. That doesn't mean that the potential can be realized, depending on how the person is electing to show up and create their 3-dimensional, 5-dimensional blended reality construct. So what happens is that we attach ourselves to wishes and dreams and fantasies and future faking, all while ignoring the red flags in our intuition, which are screaming at us along the way. It's interesting, somebody reached out to me a while ago, and we didn't have a consult. They were in a very tricky situation. They were in some barter work exchange place that their soul was screaming at them. Literally, they wrote this. My soul is screaming at me to leave. And they felt stuck and trapped. And yet, at the same time, fixated on this particular location. And what I heard is that this was their last window out. These karmic cycles often have windows, exit windows. But they weren't listening to themselves. Most importantly, they were afraid. Never got to understand what they were afraid of. They were afraid to stay. They felt afraid for their safety. Literally, they told me this. Their soul was screaming at them to leave, and yet they couldn't. bring themselves to leave. And they had become so financially dependent on this place who wasn't giving them enough for whatever they were exchanging, that their road out was slowly closing. And I could feel in their message the jaws closing around them. And I felt this perverse sense of urgency in myself, wanting to sort of speak truth to them as I was seeing it. And I very strongly urged them to leave that day. And they did not. And they listened to me. And they thanked me for my time and my opinion. And that's the last I heard of them. When we feel as though we can't leave, that's often a sign that it's too late. Darkness can be seductive, and it doesn't advertise itself in the beginning as darkness. It wears beautiful lipstick, and is polished, and might even be wearing a beautiful facade, a suit, a cigar. Deep under is a reservoir of misery, humiliation, pain, and sometimes abject terror. And when we are afraid to go it alone, we often clamor in situations like this, desperate for a change, but often looking to others to make that change within us. I have experienced my own version of this. So I'm speaking from experience. When you feel the hand of death on your throat, there's something profoundly helpless which emerges. For most people, it is a fawning, freezing response. And sometimes you need to go it alone, because when you are traveling through very dark realities, there are roaming bands of wolves and predators. It makes sense to seek solace in community that seems aligned with the vision that you want to prioritize for yourself. And I have found that there are indeed some treacherous journeys, particularly if you are traversing other worlds, other dimensions, other reality layers. There's a saying that some of us have: sunglasses up, sunglasses down. This is, in effect, a signal of whether or not it is safe. When your sunglasses are off, you can make eye contact and connect with the world. But there will be times that you want your sunglasses down and on, and you want to keep your eyes on your feet or on the center of the lanes as you're driving, and not take in too many details, not get stopped, chit-chat with random bystanders. Don't pick up hitchhikers. And for God's sakes, don't join any groups there.